This is Deadly Snakebite Bill bringing you some information about the Ho Chi Minh Trail and the U.S. Air Force reconnaissance that allowed the bombers to come in there with quite a bit of accuracy. The Ho Chi Minh Trail is known as a transportation route, but there's not a whole lot been published about it, and I think when you read about the Vietnam War, there's very little about the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And that's in my opinion, but I think there's not enough. And one of the reasons is most of the people that died on that battlefield, and I do call it a battlefield, it was 1,000 or 1,200 miles long, but it was still a battlefield. And the interesting thing about it is that a lot of the people that brought stuff down the trail weren't going to get to go back to North Vietnam until the war was over. They were going to go down there and fight with the North Vietnamese army. All right. The trail was a network of roads built from North Vietnam to South Vietnam through the neighboring countries of Laos and Cambodia. It provided logistical support to the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese army during the war. Oh man, it was a combination of truck routes and paths for foot and bicycle traffic. And when you get right down to the hard facts, it was really 9,940 miles long. But the most contested part of it was where it ran just south of the DMZ all the way down to Saigon. And that was some tough territory. They even had elephants on the trail carrying explosives. One of my squadron members recalls blowing up an elephant carrying explosives. All right, we're going to end the reconnaissance portion here first. This is a Gooney Bird, C-47, and all these things that are described here with arrows going to them are the additional upgrades for the Air Force to fly these planes at low altitude over the DMZ and over the trail. They had beefed up engines to handle a very heavy load of surveillance equipment. Radios, radio directions finders, all sorts of stuff. The avionics of 50 years ago, which were quite heavy. And they had a back-end crew of 10 people. The crew were Air Force enlisted linguists able to understand any language or dialect spoken. There were 3 officers on board, a pilot, co-pilot, and navigator. Many of these 47s flew in Europe during World War II. Okay, they were in what was called the Tactical Electronic Warfare Squadron, TEWS, during the Vietnam War. I have a close friend who was in the 362nd at Pleiku. All right. These guys pinpointed the enemy locations in real time and called in artillery and airstrikes and naval gunfire, or ground troops too. This was done during an 8-hour mission at low altitude in any weather. Okay, the mission was highly classified and coordinated by the NSA. They were forgetting to talk about it for many years. In the early 1990s is when it was declassified. So that program was very effective, very. And it is believed that the enemy never knew they were there in a reconnaissance mission. They feared the C-47s because it was also the platform for Spooky, the gunship, and did not want to provoke the hornet's nest. Boy, did I like seeing, and we call them Puff the Magic Dragon also, the gunships. And if we were getting hit, there was nothing better than to see a gunship come and hear the brrr of the Gatling guns and know that the enemy was going to be out of there. So, years later, they learned that 90% of the B-52 arc light is saturation bombing, were on targets identified by the EC-47 missions. So that is a very interesting thing about these airplanes. Actually, I was a first mechanic on a C-117, which is almost identical to this, but that was in the United States. And both of the aircraft are essentially DC-3s. Okay, here's the internal view of the aircraft, and they had all sorts of electronic equipment and 10 people in the back of that airplane operating it. And the pilot I know very well told me that some of these guys were so good, when I heard someone on the radio down on the trail, they could say, "Oh, that's Major so-and-so, and he's with the whatever, company and everything." They got to know the voices and not only just do the translating, but they got to know the voices of the people that were in charge down on the trail doing the radio communications. Okay. You can see right here on this map that where North Vietnam, in the light green, the North Vietnam is all the way up the coast of the South China Sea there. And on the western border, at the lower end, you have Cambodia and then Laos. And then in the north border is China. On the picture on the right, I know it's very, very hard to see, but about split the Vietnam into about a 60-40, and right at the 60-40 where there's the neck on the map, you'll see Quang Tri. Quang Tri was where I was a good bit of the time in Vietnam, and our base was 14 kilometers from the DMZ, just out of artillery range. Now, we weren't out of rocket and mortar range, I can tell you that, but artillery, yeah. But we would go up to the DMZ. There's the Qua Viet River, and that's where they would bring in supplies to Dong Ha, the artillery base. But anyhow, just look to the left, then along the western side of Vietnam on the map, and that's where the Ho Chi Minh Trail was. It was basically just hugging the border on the Laotian and Cambodian side of the border. Now, there were missions sent into Cambodia by President Nixon that found unbelievable amounts of supplies that were brought in by the North Vietnamese. Additionally, the North Vietnamese had a lot of trouble bringing in diesel fuel, gasoline, all that kind of stuff in barrels, so they built six plastic pipelines down through the jungles, the triple canopy jungles, down south, so they could have fuel for their vehicles. That is just an incredible story. I hadn't known that until I was studying up for this YouTube video. Okay, you can see here where the black arrows are, and then how it splits into South Vietnam. That's on the left-hand map. On the right-hand map, you see a bunch of trucks coming down a really nice highway compared to the rest of the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Okay. I have some more photos real quickly for you that show the Ho Chi Minh Trail looking like the surface of the moon, full of craters, bomb craters that is. To the left we have a Thunder Chief, a thud, because they say that's the noise it makes when it crashes. And then you have an F-4 Phantom tossing out a bunch of bombs. And at the bottom I have a little shot of some napalm. We use a lot of napalm, and we weren't very popular in the world community for using so much nape, as they called it. Okay, here's a picture of the luxury of the Laotian jungle. You know, it sure is a garden spot, but you can see these guys. It's amazing what they went through just to get down the doggone trail, let alone stay alive. Okay, here's where obviously there'd been a nape attack on the right-hand picture because everything has been burned off. But a couple of North Vietnamese trucks making it down the trail, and to the left there's some more trucks. And the top left-hand corner, you're going to see a guy with his arm out telling that truck probably which fork in the bombed-out jungle roads to take. Got some trucks up here in the top left fording the river. Now, take a look at the top right. Bomb craters, tremendous amount of them. Same in the lower left. It looked this way around Quezon too, like the surface of the moon. Between the bomb craters and the Agent Orange, that was a barren landscape. All right, on the bottom right, you see a bunch of trucks. Well, the North Vietnamese needed those trucks. So they were very careful about when they used them, when they didn't, and corralled them in a place. And there's quite a few pictures on the internet about them corralling the trucks. So what we've seen here in these 10 slides is a glimpse, only a glimpse, of what was happening and what things look like on the trail. Now, the name Ho Chi Minh Trail is of American origin. Another name that was given it is the Blood Road. If relentless American bombing didn't get him, it would take a North Vietnamese soldier as many as 6 months to make the grueling trek through the jungle down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. At least 10% of the casualties along the trail were from such illnesses as malaria. At regular intervals along the route, the NLF, National Liberation Front, built base camps, as well as providing a place for them to rest. The base camps provided medical treatment for those who had been injured or had fallen ill on the journey. They excavated intricate interconnecting tunnels with concealed entrances, hid trail trekkers, often Vietnamese at any given time during the war. The trail system was vastly improved even as more people used the trail. The trek was reduced to 6 weeks for a fit soldier. Well, as it all ended up, there was as many as 20,000 soldiers a month came from Hanoi by this way. In an attempt to stop this traffic, it was suggested that a barrier of barbed wire and minefields called the McNamara Line should be built, but the plan was abandoned in 1967 after repeated attacks by the NLF, which is the Viet Cong, on those involved in constructing the barrier. All right, the United States could not block the Ho Chi Minh Trail with ground forces because the countries it passed through were officially neutral. Extensive aerial bombing did not prevent the North Vietnamese from moving hundreds of tons of war supplies per day down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And undeniably, this lay at the heart of the war for the ability they had to resupply. For the Vietnamese, the North, the Ho Chi Minh Trail symbolized the aspirations of a people. Hiking it became the central experience of a generation. So, folks, hoping if I get enough views on this video, I will do a second one that really gets into more depth and into the warehousing in the triple canopy jungles in Cambodia. So for now, I'm going to say the good old helicopter Semper Fi.